We're just recording now, everyone. So thank you, everyone, for attending this Aotearoa Conversations Session. This one is about building bridges between social enterprise and structural change. And we've got a global perspective today. So we've got case studies from Gaza, the US, and New Zealand. This has been brought to you by Akina and the Impact Initiative. Wanted to warmly welcome our co-facilitators today, who are Marissa, Kaloga from Otago University, and Rasha Abu-Safieh from the Edmund Honorary Fellow. I will hand over to them to start the session and generate some great discussion. Hope everyone has a good session. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tan, and thanks, Helen, for inviting us to do this. We're really happy to be able to share some of our experiences with you and hopefully hear from you as well at the end of our presentation today. We do have a PowerPoint, so I'll just go ahead and share the screen with you. So today we are going to be talking about some structural change. So to start off, let's see, is this one up? There we go. We've got me and Rasha. So I am a lecturer at the University of Otago, so in the social work department, and I do research in the area of economic justice and inclusive entrepreneurship. And Rasha, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Rasha Abu-Safieh, and I'm an Edmund Honorary Fellow, came to New Zealand 9 months ago. I'm also the co-founder of GGATEWay, the impact sourcing social enterprise in Palestine.
So Rasha and I are both newcomers to New Zealand, but planting roots here for the long term. So thank you so much for welcoming us into your beautiful country. So today we're going to do three things. The first is to introduce some frameworks. We can call it theory, frameworks, ideas, concepts, whatever you want to, but some ideas around ways you can kind of think about structural change or think about some of the impact that you're doing. And then we're going to apply that to some case studies of work that Rasha and I have done. And then thirdly, we want to hear from you, your reactions to the way that we frame things or your own stories or your own work, or kind of start the conversation however it goes. So to start off, I want to ask what the difference is between the tree in the pot and all of the trees in the forest. So we have a tree in a pot. It's kind of its own little system, isn't it? It's bounded by the pot at the bottom. It exists, it's fine, but it's quite different from the trees in the forest that are all interacting with one another, that are all influencing one another, that are all communicating via their mycelium and their roots. You know, it's a system. And so rather than thinking of us and our organizations as a tree in a pot that is beautiful to look at, but doesn't really influence a whole lot, we're thinking of ourselves as trees planted in a forest. So how can the forest all work together in the best way possible? So kind of put yourself in that forest right now in the work that you do.
Yes, and as a part of the theories as well, in order to bring and make it visualized for the connection between the social enterprises and structural change, it's very important to speak about these four elements included in this theory and in this objective. The first one is about any social enterprise. What made it unique? It's its business model. And every social enterprise really needs to focus on a social, cultural, or environmental purpose, or without that, it will be just a charity, a normal one. And the second part is about the openness and transparency, like sharing the economy, social enterprises, as an open source as possible, and making sure that every step structure inside the social enterprise is clear to everyone. And also the outcome and impact of what the impact the social enterprise were able to create within the community. These three parts of the social enterprise structure made it so easy to do the connection with the system change, because mainly every social enterprise needs to dig deep on the structural issue and the cause and the problem that it's working for. And the second one, the social enterprise provide a good model on how to solve the issue and give a good case of example about solving the problems within the community.
So one of the ideas that we want to talk about today, you may or may not already be familiar with, and it's the idea of collective impact. So if we see in this diagram on the very left, we have a lot of arrows going this way and that, and we can understand that to be in kind of a sector of disorder and confusion. There may be problems happening. People may understand that they don't like what's happening, but they don't quite know what to do about it. If you move one over to the right, we see where it talks about individual impact, but in isolation. And this might be a lot of different organizations, might be government, private sector, social enterprises, nonprofits, community groups, all trying to do something to address a problem, say child poverty, but doing so in isolation, doing so only on their own. We think about coordinated impact with alignment. We can think of all those different types of organizations across a bunch of different sectors, all understanding, okay, this is the problem. We are all tackling child poverty, but we're doing so kind of still in your own silo. But when we move into the idea of collective impact, it's about working together in a very structured way to align yourself across multiple aspects of the work that you're doing so that you're all kind of pushing one another uphill in the same direction. So what does this look like? There's 5 different aspects of collective impact that make it officially collective impact. Whether or not that's useful to be quite so rigid, we'll talk about in just a moment. And these are actually taken from Kanye and Kramer's SSAR article in 2011, and is really kind of considered the beginning of the era of collective impact thinking and systems change. Was actually around the issue of child poverty in Cincinnati, Ohio. These 2 folks from Stanford were able to go there and see what the hospital system and a lot of the community agencies are able to do together, working in a specific way. And from that, they were able to kind of create this model. And so the first part of it is a common agenda. So it's a shared vision from all participants that includes both an understanding of the problem, a joint approach, and agreed upon actions. Secondly, you need to have shared measures. So we can think that all the different organizations are doing their work, but they need to have a shared measurement system. So understanding a shared set of KPIs, a shared set of metrics, so that you can measure what's happening across all of the organizations that are working towards that agreed upon vision and goal. Common indicators used for improvement, right? Sharing that measurement is also sharing a language. Mutually reinforcing activities means that you have this diverse set of stakeholders. A lot of times we're talking cross-sector stakeholders coordinating differentiated activities, but all those activities are working together, talking to each other through those shared measurements, pushing forward to that common agenda. Nextly is the continuous communication. And the communication really is the bedrock of that trust, making sure that the relationships are there, making sure that there's not information that's not getting through the stakeholders, and ensuring that you capture that motivation and you don't let it go. And the last, and some would argue the most important thing to have in order to make this work, is what's called a backbone organization, backbone support. So a backbone organization in this multi-stakeholder arrangement is an independent funded staff dedicated to the initiative. So it's really serving that function to hold everybody together. So it's providing ongoing support, guiding vision and strategy, supporting those aligned activities, establishing those shared measurement practices, because we can understand there's a lot of players and they are not, most of them, going to have the capacity to serve that administrative function. And so with all of those elements, you have something called collective impact. And I'm happy to share the PowerPoint later that includes the resources that this information comes from. And so there's been critique about it. It's only been around for 10 years, but it's already spreading quite a bit as far as trying to understand how can we work together to make that larger systems change, type of change that can't easily be reversed, the type of change, that double loop type of learning where you don't have to continuously put inputs, but the system itself has changed such that the problem no longer exists the way it did before, right? That's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to work ourselves out of a job, right? But there's been criticism that sometimes you don't have all the elements of this collective impact model. Sometimes there's other ways of working together. And how do we express that? A lot of times people might look for funding. Do we want to do a collective impact model? but they don't have all of these. And so there needed to be additional differentiation between ways of working together. And Wang, Cooper, and Shoemate in 2020 published an article on the 4 types of community system solution, which does just that. In response to kind of the back and forth around, well, it's not real collective impact, or does it matter? They were saying, okay, we're going to look across these 2 axes. If we look at the y-axis, right, the up and down axis, it's how centralized the coalition's governance is. Goes from decentralized to centralized. And the other factor on the x-axis, going back and forth, is the amount of cross-sector engagement going from low to high. And so if we have these 2 continuums, it separates it into 4 quadrants. And those 4 quadrants represent 4 major ways of building those coalitions and working together. And so, and rather than arguing about if it is officially collective impact model or collective model or not, let's look at it. Let's think about this in lots of different ways. And so this is really what we're going to be talking about today. So there's 4 different kinds, and I don't want to waste too much time talking about exactly the difference between each of them. So I'll just kind of go through this a little quickly, understanding that we'll have time to talk a little bit later. And the first one is a low overhead coalition. So that's low cross-sector engagement and a centralized governance. You have clearly defined agenda, you have sector diversity in partnerships is lacking, but the coalitions try to take advantage of anything that's available. A small set of core partners that have that communication, but there's resource constraints. So a lot of times that type of a model might be appropriate when you don't have money or you don't have a backbone organization. The second one is a holistic coalition that has that high cross-sector engagement and centralized governance. We might think of this as most closely reflecting what they think of as a true collective impact model. So those partners have a long history of working together, very data-driven, a lot of accountability and communication, quite large, most developed coordination among partners, but not as much direct community engagement. The third one is a multi-stakeholder coalition, and it's quite similar to that holistic coalition, except there's a bit less of that centralization in the governance structure. So you still have a lot of different partners, you still have a lot of data to inform decision-making, but rather than really being the official backbone organization, the lead agency is more of an agenda setter, is more of a facilitator rather than an agenda setter. So it facilitates the work, but doesn't necessarily take ownership of it. And the last one has low cross-sector engagement and a decentralized governance structure, which is community-led coalition. So this is a very community-based, often no backbone organization, not much infrastructure, a lot of volunteers, not as much data-driven, but this is still a coalition, right? And so when we can understand these 4 different types, sometimes it's helpful to see, well, what does that actually look like? And so now what we're going to do is going to provide actually 3 different case studies. We're going to start with Rasha's work in Palestine, and then we're going to work our way towards what I've done in the US and finish up with a brand new project that we've recently started here in Dunedin.
Thanks, Marissa. And like what made us excited about presenting this session, that I have been like in the position of creating and lived the experience of creating an impact and establishing the enterprise, but also it's very important and valuable for us in order to show how creating the enterprise is really connected to the impact model and the collective model, and how this really driving systematic change within the communities. Although like for any founder of a business or an enterprise, they have the passion in order to solve a problem within the community, but how that can drive like more systematic structured change. Hopefully in my case study with the GGATEWAY, we'll be able to answer some of these questions and share some of the experience that I have been through. So GGATEWAY, it's an impact sourcing social enterprise in Palestine. We have started in 2012, and to give a little bit about the context about Gaza. Gaza has 2 million people living in 365 kilometers, very crowded, have been under blockade for the past 13 years. Very difficult economical and political situation that has lots of questions, like many people trying to solve that problem. But for me and my business partners and the people who were involved in the early stages of the gateway, we were looking toward creating a solution for the people who are living there, regardless the other components of the ecosystem that we cannot do any change inside. And the gateway was really mainly looking to the problem of the high unemployment rate among IT graduates in Palestine. Specifically that 70% of the youth graduated from IT specializations are unemployed, and the problem became more chronic and difficult for women in the industry, where only 11% of them is participating on the workforce. And this is the problem about the employment, but also there is another problem was engaged as well with this like equation. It's about the education industry skills gap. Like graduates leave the university with very amazing theoretical skills and experience, where the industry all the time facing this difficulty and problem of finding the right talents to engage with. And Palestine and Gaza in specific is like any other place in the world. Although regardless the context around it, this problem also exists there, and we were looking to find a solution to solve this problem. And when it comes to the concept that Marissa gave more details and information about it, it's about what was happening before we established the social enterprise. And GGATEWay is the first established impact sourcing social enterprise in Palestine. So the model itself was new for the stakeholders, and this is one of the challenges we have faced, how to make stakeholders get like connected in order to understand how this model can solve a problem, like taking in consideration all the efforts that have been started before. So with solving the unemployment rate problem and the skills gap, there was lots of individual activities and efforts happening, either solving the skills problem or either solving the private sector engagement problem that people are trying to do all these different directions. And also there's another main concept was like happening in Gaza, that Gaza is mainly as a humanitarian destination. It needs like food support, humanitarian support. But can Gaza be more than a relief destination? Is there any economic development can happen from that spot of the world? Would the IT be the solution for this situation? And our answer when we started, yes. Let's try a model that can be an end-to-end solution from education to the labor market and provide a solution like helping the skills to be increased, and also shows that graduates from Gaza can be productive in the IT outsourcing industry. And when you look to the problem and the solution, IT is also a very huge potential because it's a borderless industry. So we have just in one click removed all the barriers of being isolated in Gaza with all the situation around us. So to give a little bit concept about the gateway, it's a hybrid business model, social enterprise, that has an impact operation and has a business operation. And with the impact, we are using all the donor money that can be available in Gaza in order to do training and career development programs. So we had one revenue stream coming from that direction, which is available in Gaza, but we have engaged that in a well way with the business operation by doing IT outsourcing services and enabling freelancing and remote working as an industry in Palestine. And so any graduate engaged with our program on the first stage, they got access to training programs between 2 to 6 months, according to the available resources and training and competencies. Then we engage them in our outsourcing projects. So they get an access to at least 1 year experience, or they get access to the experience to work remotely with the different clients all over the world. And this is the uniqueness about the model. We were able to do an evidence-based proof that investing in skills in connection with the industry can really create impact within the community that we are in. So within the journey of the Gateway during the past 8 years, we have lots of impact that we were able to show the community and lead and inspire other stakeholders in order to join us within the journey. And they were able to see the impact. So in 2016, for example, when we were talking about freelancing as a model of remote working for Gaza, we faced lots of difficulty to raise the first 100K in order to implement the first project. But now in 2020, like more than $4 million have been invested from different donors in order to create different freelancing projects, not only with the Gateway as an enterprise, but also that encouraged other stakeholders to the community to copy the model and to do the same programs and to train more graduates to enter that industry. And we were so happy because the social enterprise itself, after 8 years, we were able to create hundreds of jobs in Palestine, train thousands of graduates, and also enable them to access lots of short-term job opportunities all over the world. And recently, the Gateway got $2.95 million in order to be expanded as a regional outsourcing hub in the MENA region. And the point about the model itself is like it's solving a problem, but also the social enterprise have been recognized in order to create some systemic change and support other programs for youth and creating job opportunities within the community and the context, which is considered like one of the most contexts in the world. So how the enterprise as a model and as a part of our case study enabled creating this structural change, we can summarize that like in multiple points. We were able to impact the donors and the funding directions, not only in economic, like basic economic development or humanitarian support or psychosocial support, but also looking toward funding the capacity building and career development for remote working and freelancing. The youth themselves, they are considerably one of the huge parts of the waves of the structure of the community. We were inspired them in order to understand that work can be integrated with learning and they can work and learn on the same time. We have changing their interest toward the job and the type of the job. Before that time when we started, most of youth were considering only governmental job or United Nations job is the solution for their career. But now they are more open to the concept that there is remote working, some consultancy work, easy to work with a client all over the world. And also the enterprise introduced the concept about the freelancing and outsourcing as a position, as a solution for the situation in Palestine. And when it comes to mapping this structural change with the 5 elements of the collective impact, I can say like we have almost were able to apply most of these parts during our work. We had a common agenda within the first key stakeholders that we were able to build our alliance in the beginning. When we like get engaged with the UNRWA, the United Nations, they were very interested to see how they can outsource some of their work to the industry, to the community. And we were very interested in proving the concept of creating impact enterprise and providing successful freelancers and developers working from Gaza. Like all of that, we were able to being open and communicate and contribute to the community. And with the collation model as well, we were looking to ourselves where this social enterprise can fit within the different models available. And I can tell you, we have been more to the low overhead collation. Because we were trying to create an impact, not with a great collaboration with lots of stakeholders. And we have been centralized in our governance, data-driven based on our way of doing the work. But now I can say that the enterprise, by being an inspiring model for other organizations and stakeholders, it may move to more holistic collation, where more like bigger decision makers and parties can get involved in our work. So giving it now to Marissa to speak like and to guide you and tell you more about the second case study in our presentation.
Thank you so much, Rasha. I always love hearing about the Gateway. So I'm going to offer you a bit of a smaller program. So this is a program that I worked on developing when I was the Director of Innovation at the Economic and Community Development Institute in Ohio. So ECDI is a registered as a nonprofit, operates as a social enterprise. In general, it's a microfinance institute and one-stop shop for small business development. Some people call it entrepreneurship, some people call it small business. And so I ran the non-banking side of things, Women's Business Center, a business innovation center, training programs, community outreach, that type of thing that supports the business owners in growing their businesses. So ECDI earns money on the margin between the interest rate they charge and what they have to pay on their lines of credit, on their trainings and on memberships to their smaller organizations within the larger institute. So what I'm going to talk about today has to do with development of a program to support jobs in the African American community in Ohio. And so I wanted to present two graphs here to just kind of set the scene. So the racial wealth divide in the US has gotten worse over time and not better. So we can see in the blue we have 1983, and in the red we have 2016. And if you look over on the left side, you'll see that everybody has actually a little bit less well off in 2016 than 1983. This is kind of well known. But the difference is that it's actually quite motivated by your racial identity. And so you can see that in 1983 to 2016, white Americans actually did significantly better. But as you see in minority populations, it was always unequal. Black individuals here going from around 7,000 to down to 3,000 and some change. It's become more equal over time. And so you can see that also reflected in the unemployment rates in the US. On the left, you see the height of the global recession, and unemployment did not affect all communities the same. You see that at the height of the recession, white and Asian communities saw between 8 and 10% maximum unemployment, but in Black communities, it went up to 16%. And while in 2018, you can see that thankfully everyone's doing a bit better, there's still quite a large discrepancy. And we saw that play out even higher when it came to small business, that during the recession in 2008, and we also see this now during the COVID recession, that minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses tend to have a higher closure rate in response to those economic pressures. And so all of this kind of situation culminated in 2016, ECDI receiving a phone call from an informal group of African American construction contractors in Columbus, Ohio. These were people that were kind of nearing retirement age and really were thinking about living the good life. You know, they worked hard and they built their businesses and they did well for themselves and wanted to retire. But they were seeing that the 2008 financial crisis had really impacted the construction sector, and that minority contractors, specifically African-American subcontractors in construction, have virtually been wiped out. The smaller ones that they were hoping to mentor and kind of come and take their place and make sure that there was continuity in that sector. And they didn't quite know what to do about it. ECDI had developed very good relationships with minority communities because that was the primary population that we worked with in developing small business. And so we had that good reputation. We had a reputation for developing programs that addressed specific community needs, such as the Food Fort, which is a food-based business incubator that was made accessible by low fees, and a women's business center to support minority women opening businesses. And so they knew about us, they knew our track record, and they said, let's talk, let's try to figure something out. How do we generate a new cohort of minority construction contractors in the city? And so because ECDI has good relationships across multiple sectors, we were able to be that facilitator. We were able to work with the Small Business Administration, the city, banks that we had great relationships with, universities, construction companies, and even really large construction projects such as a really big new library and a new prison, to bring everyone together to talk about, okay, how is it working? How is the system working now that people are not able to get a foot in the door? And what do we need to change in order to create a new door in that system so that the pipe is unblocked, and if people want to start a construction business and they're willing to put the work in, that can actually happen for them? And so through a very long process of bringing folks together and trying to figure out what those levers were and what the mechanisms needed to be to create those new open doors, we came up with a program called Capital for Construction. And so the Capital for Construction program addressed the needs that were identified through the conversations from these partners that ECDI facilitated. And it came down to three main components. One being construction industry training, and this is not to replace trades training, this is to complement it with the real life reality of what you need to know in order to get started. The kind of insider's view of the industry. We all work in different industries and we know how they're written on paper and how they're lived are quite different. And so getting that insider's view and getting the very specific trainings on what to do in certain situations or how to set things up was very helpful. The second was networking support. You know, the new African-American construction contractors needed a lot of new networking. They didn't have those social networks necessary to get started. And so facilitating that, setting up mentoring relationships was really pivotal in helping people to be able to build their own confidence and learn from people who had been there, done that. And the last thing was a microfinance loan instrument from $500,000 to $350,000. And I wanted to show you kind of how that worked because it was a intervention that was created because of the multi-sector partnerships. The conversations that we had facilitated this idea, and it would not have happened if we were all acting alone. And so basically it is a joint check agreement between ECDI, the construction contractor, and what's called the prime or main contractor who has the large project. So through the industry trainings, this person here in the hard hat is able to submit a bid and gets chosen by the prime contractor. Then that person comes to ECDI and says, hey, I've got this contract. Can you give me a loan to pay upfront my employees and my supplies? Because we don't get paid upfront by the prime contractor, right? So the new business owner is able to pay for the supplies and their employees to complete the job. Once the job is completed, the prime contractor gives the money to ECDI. ECDI keeps the loan amount and sends the profits to the business owner. And so that solved the problem of people not being able to put the money up front to do the job. And also the problem of prime contractors sometimes not wanting to pay out to the small guy first and them having to wait and being very cash strapped during that waiting period. And just to put a face with a story, this is one of our clients. This is KAMALA, and this is from a newspaper article that she was kind enough to be a part of. She was a member of the Women's Business Center and recipient of mobility lending, where she started a painting company. Through ECDI's training, she was able to write a bid that got chosen for a library contract for painting. She hired new employees who now have jobs. She was able to do that contract, finish it up, get paid, and keep growing. So she is an amazing person, and just wanted to make sure that kind of put a face with what you might imagine the recipients look like. So outcomes, more than 350 new construction contracting businesses, all are minority business enterprise certified. And more than $2.5 million of US dollars mobilized to provide that support for the joint check agreements between the prime contractors, ECDI, and the business owners themselves. So when we think about collective impact, ECDI really served as a facilitating organization. You know, that's one of the main things about why it's so important to have social enterprise at the table in collective impact, because we're able to speak both languages in a way that not a lot of partners can. We can speak the language of business because we run like a business. We generate income. We understand the hustle necessary to make that happen. But we can also speak like a social service because we're impact-based, and we understand what you have to do in order to get that impact happening. And so you can serve a really important function in creating that open and continuous communications and that shared measurement and language necessary to bring the partners together and set that common agenda for change. And one of the mutually reinforcing activities we were able to do is to ensure that the city required a quota for minority contractors for large projects, so that if a large construction company wanted to build the new library that there needed to be built in there, you have to hire a diverse workforce in order to build this library. You can't just go with the same people. It needs to be people from here. There needs to be women. There needs to be minorities. This needs to be an inclusive project. And so that's one of those mutually reinforcing activities because we're bringing everybody to the table. And this really sits quite squarely in a multi-stakeholder coalition. ECDI is not the typical backbone organization. We really were the facilitator for the network. We were definitely data-driven. We definitely had quite a wide variety of partners, and those partners had kind of a shared agenda, but they each had their own goals as well. So that kind of brings us to the last thing that we wanted to chat with you about, a brand new project. I want to make sure we have time to talk with you. So we'll probably just take a minute or two to introduce this, but we want to make sure that you know what we're doing here right now. So here in Dunedin, where we've lived for less than a year, me and Rasha, we're working with Startup Dunedin, which is a nonprofit that promotes small business development and entrepreneurship in our city. So what we're doing right now, and this kind of is furthering the work that both Rasha and I do around developing a really inclusive and diverse career pathways for all people, is looking at the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So that's really kind of think of the ecosystem as a garden, right? What kind of businesses can it grow? Can any seed that's planted there grow? Does it have the nutrients and the sun and the soil and the pH to be able to grow, right? And so we can think of all of those different elements of a garden being the different components of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, whether it's entrepreneurial support organizations or financing or policy or human capital. So right now we're focusing really on those support organizations, those organizations whose mission is to support the development of small business. And so we're working on a social network project to see who's working with who. How are all of these different organizations in Dunedin, and we've been recognized as having a pretty robust ecosystem, how are they working together? What does the structure of this network actually look like? And how is it serving diverse populations? Is it not? What can we do to make that better? And so, we're really at the front end of this project. We'll be sending the survey out, I think next week, right? To gather the data, and we'll see what happens from there. We're trying to bring people together to talk about this issue. We know that entrepreneurship in New Zealand is not representative of the population. It is whiter and more male than the overall population. And so what that tends to say to us is if something is not representative, then there's usually barriers. Because women have great ideas, ethnic minorities have great ideas. Why is this not represented in the small business in our city? And so we'll be looking at that. We'll be doing some group model building and co-creation workshops to figure out, take our model to the community and say, what do you think? Is this working for you? Is this not working for you? But right now we're kind of that low overhead coalition. We're not at a strong multi-stakeholder partnership yet. We're really at the beginning of our collective impact model and trying to bring the partners together, be able to speak everyone's language, and come up with a coalition that serves the purpose of the work that we're doing. Rasha, do you want to say anything about our current project?
Yes, because we are so excited about doing it. With the experience that we have in seeing the impact, how social enterprises can support the disadvantaged communities or really drive systematic change, we have made our decision to start with this research project because it will show exactly how the dynamics of the system is currently shaped here in Dunedin, and it will enable not only us in order to do the initiatives we are interested about, but it will enable other decision makers and the stakeholders within the community to see the value that we are talking about, to make them able to reposition themselves to support fixing more chronic problems within the community. And that, of course, would lead to more empowered and inclusive entrepreneurship sector, but also will enable creating more jobs within different industries and sectors. Like either it could be in construction, similar to that model, or creating jobs through IT or remote working. Like any industry can be supportive within the foundation of the infrastructure is well integrated and well understood by all the key stakeholders, players within the sector, within the situation we are in.
So with that, we would love to hear your stories, your ideas, your questions, reactions to our work, or just whatever you came here wanting to talk about. We'd love to talk about it with you. So with the rest of our time, we'll just kind of open it up to whatever the group thinks would be a good direction to use the rest of our time.
So you just feel free to either put it through the chat or ask through the video.
Thank you, Marissa and Rasha. That was really, really interesting. I've got quite a few questions, but my first one, because it's the most immediate one, just maybe clarifying first before I ask the question. Your last project, the Dunedin one, the ecosystem, is it you're looking at the Dunedin entrepreneurial ecosystem or New Zealand's entrepreneurial ecosystem?
We are starting with Dunedin, hopefully with the support entrepreneurial ecosystem, but it has the potential and we have the passion in order to expand it for the whole country. But Dunedin has a unique structure that enables us to do the first part of the project and also to share the evidence-based result that we can multiply and expand in the whole country.
Yeah, great. I'd love to talk to you more about this because one of my projects last year, which didn't eventuate, was to start mapping the social enterprise. I can't even say it anymore. It's like a week of social enterprise. The social enterprise ecosystem in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in order to bring, even starting small, but in order to bring that sort of visibility that we don't have around who the actors are and how they connect together, and to give that visibility, transparency, to enable people to find each other and collaborate. And so yeah, that's something that's really close to my heart, and keen to discuss further whether there are some synergies with your project in terms of the outcomes that you're thinking of with your project. Yeah,
absolutely. I can definitely see a lot of crossover. One of the things that Rasha and I have found in the work that we do around job creation, and whether it's in tech or small business, is that and social enterprise knows this more than probably any other sector. There's such this arbitrary difference between social services and business services. The people that I work with generally need support in both areas. And kind of siloing them, it does nobody any service, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so being able to figure out where those touch points are between, people, especially marginalized communities, needing support on the front end, and negotiating the benefits cliff on the back end of, do I go forward with this? Do I grow my business because I'm losing my benefits? And how do you deal with that? I mean, all those questions are really important.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so yeah, keen to pick up the conversation. I've got many more questions, but I'll hand over to someone else.
So I think you may all know one another, but I don't know any of you. So we could even just, you can tell me the work that you're doing or the project that you're working on.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Again, encourage you to just unmute yourself and do it through here. Otherwise, you do have the chat as well if you feel more comfortable that way.
Alison, you want to speak? You are muted. Yeah.
Thought I'd unmuted it, but it didn't. Yeah, no, I'm really interested in the ECDI work that you did in the economic, I'm really interested in that social business connection, because I just feel like there's so many opportunities that don't or aren't being explored. So yeah, I'm really keen to connect with people around that. And good to do a project in Auckland, actually. Yeah,
there's, it's interesting. New Zealand is one of the few places, I think, in the world that doesn't have a pretty robust microfinance for small business. You have some for, credit for debt relief or more social concerns, with 0% interest, but there's not really, a strong crowdfunding even through, Kiva USA does crowdfunding, not just in the developing world, but also in the global north. So it is interesting that it's developed in a different way here for, I'm sure, many historic reasons. I do know that I think Foundation North is supporting the development of a refugee small business microfinance pilot. So if that's the area of the country that you're in, you can kind of look out for that soon. I know that they're just kind of working on getting that pilot up and running. But interestingly enough, it's a fantastic place to start around microfinance. That's the same way that ECDI started. The founder was a Jewish refugee from the Soviet Union who fled the Soviet Union and grew up in the US and saw her dad struggle with trying to open a business. And so the ECDI started in the basement of Jewish Family Services and really expanded really widely, because once the program was designed to serve the most marginalized, they found is that it was actually needed by a lot of other people as well. And so I don't think they've ever stopped expanding. The need is really great, but a lot of times it's not a need that is brought to the forefront very easily.
And what maximized that within the flexibility of the social enterprise model, that made it easy in order to transfer the knowledge and being transparent within the way that the work is done, it encouraged other people to join the wave in order to do that work. So this is like what enabled like the communities to accept, because any start is very difficult in the beginning, but once you start to see the first seeds planted with that direction, and we can see that social enterprises make it like a good environment in order to support these waves of change, like what ECDI did like in the microfinance project.
Okay. Sorry, can I button? There's a plane going over at the same time, but I am very new to this scene, and I'm coming to it from a business background and wanting to, I see our products being able to be given out to the community. And I was really interested in the Gaza scenario that you've come up with. I'm afraid I'm so new that a lot of the terminology and words that you've been talking about here have sort of gone to whoosh. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to be part of the conversation, is the learning. We're involved in e-learning, and we're giving a lot of we're working with corporates and creating templated learning from learning modules, e-learning modules. But I'm interested in the Gaza model that you have, where you're able to help lift communities through. And so what we want to do is a lot of social gifting, and that's where the social enterprise comes in. Once we have developed the material, it's all happening up front. And then what we do with it from there is totally up to us. And I think the COVID scenario and what's happening in New Zealand, I could see so many similarities and parallels to what you were talking there, that is happening to not maybe the same extent, but it's happening in the New Zealand market. My biggest problem, and sorry, I had to just, Alison, what you were talking about, is I don't know how to reach out to people. I've got the stuff that I want to give away, and I'm really struggling to find people to give it away to. And I had a conversation with someone today who doesn't want the royalty that we're offering. She doesn't want her reseller fee. Instead, she wants to gift her module to somebody else. So I'm just beginning my social enterprise journey and how to do it. I've sort of spoken in now because anyone who can help and guide me and make that come through. I haven't reached out to Akina yet, and that is the next thing that I need to do. But gosh, you lot are so inspiring. And you're doing all the stuff that's in my head, and I want to know more.
Thanks, Kim. Like, we would be very happy to continue the conversation after this session to speak a little bit about the secret steps and within the model of building the social enterprise, and to support more people to join the vision, which we call it the theory of change, of inspiring all the participants within the work inside the social enterprise to join you with the journey. Like, that needs some tips inside. Like, for example, it was very difficult when I started to speak about the e-learning and long life learning as a job for youth in Gaza. They were all against it. They were like just saying that education just only in university. Are you telling me now, when I have a course during my working time, that is also considering as a job, as a work? So these all bits together, what made it easy in order to prove the concept, made other people see that change, and then starting scaling it up on a larger scale. And that was the strategy we have been in. Starting very, very, very small, and then expanding slowly, like with any sales strategy, but also we use the same business technique on the impact world. I'm happy to continue the conversation.
And that's no different to what you would do in business. It's no different to how you would introduce training to a corporate environment and learning.
Exactly.
Hi there. I do have a comment just to, my name's Zachariah. I'm going to come from a Pacific or Indigenous perspective. I remember, I think it was on the second day, one of the speakers at the forum said the whole notion of social enterprise comes naturally to Aborigine people, Indigenous people. And I really like that metaphor that you showed at the beginning of that plant on its own in a container in the forest or the bush. Because when I think of my community, I'm from one of the population, we thrive in our ecosystem. And the step change here in New Zealand requires us to come into that container. But I think what's missing, which is part of that structure change for us, is actually going into, if we use that picture that you show, it's like a greenhouse. Because people, it's a progressive step. And what you are developing is scaffolding to allow the community to take those steps that is foreign to them in a Western context, but not foreign in their world. And so me listening to this and listening to Kim, who said she is new to this, what's not new to me is social enterprise, but what's new to me, which I have no knowledge, is what you two are talking about and bringing those two worlds together. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing that, because you've painted a picture in my mind how to help navigate my community in this world. And by doing that, we don't lose who we are as a unique community, Indigenous people with values. And I think that is the gift that I've been able to just see and listen for your presentation. So in our language, we say haka te lava, which is thank you and prosperous blessing to you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I want to share like one personal thing for me as well. When we started like building the gateway as a social enterprise in Gaza, we have been facing the same problem. How we can adopt a global model, make it work in Gaza, but also keep our identity and take in consideration all the cultural aspects and the political aspects around us. And we kept that vision in our mind during the whole way and make it like slowly clear. We are not having like the cover of other people's work, how they implemented it. They did this model in Silicon Valley. It's not necessarily that it can work in Gaza. So taking in consideration the social aspects within the community, the social norms and the culture, and then made that as a crucial part of the boon of the way that the social enterprise built is what make it successfully to be like waved within the community, not to be odd out of the system structure and systemic change that we are trying to create. So that is a huge part needs to be considered within the way that you are building the work.
I want to say thank you, Zachariah, for your comments. Yeah, you know, Rasha and I, you know, beyond the work that we do, have kind of a more an economic worldview that is more like Kate Raworth's Donut Economics, if you haven't read that or seen the model. And I know that that's also been interpreted from a Maori worldview as well to be a little bit more reflective, but really seeing, you know, social enterprise being kind of a response to that new way of looking at a more sustainable and resilient economy that serves people rather than just serves to be growth. And thinking about social enterprise, kind of bringing us back to kind of full circle around to, you know, doing activities that promote that rather than just for wealth's sake, but to promote a higher degree of well-being among all people. So that's kind of a similar guiding framework to the way that Rasha and I approach our work.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful discussion. Marissa and Rasha, just wanted to give you a little bit of a chance to perhaps make the last few points that you before we go, and then if you come back to me, and I'll just outline some of the next steps for people. Thank you.
Yeah, just want to say thank you to everyone that showed up today. It's nice to see some new faces. It's why we do these types of conferences, to make those new connections. I'm happy to send out the slide deck to anyone who thinks it would be helpful for them. I'm the only Marissa Kaloga there is, so it's easy enough to Google me. Or I can also put my email in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much. And you know, I look forward to getting to know you guys better over time and seeing the wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah, and same here, Marissa. We are really appreciating and acknowledging all the efforts that is currently happening in New Zealand, and we are looking forward to making New Zealand our home as well. So as much as we would like to engage and support, collaborate, have further conversation, so the knowledge we have can be well shared, and also we are like creating more inclusive and supportive, like diverse community as much as it will be useful for all of us. Thank you.
It's been a really wonderful session. The case studies have just been so inspirational to me. Aline, did you want to say something? I see you are on mute.
I was just going to say thank you, but now that you've given the mic to me, I'd say I'm loving the fact that we're having this conversation between like the magic of bringing together the thinking of working within a place, within a particular context, with particular people and their values and their culture, whilst thinking about bigger change, because that's where the magic happens. And we've had a few of these conversations reflecting on this week, and I see more and more the thinking of system change being woven through, like, you know, very specific place-based, community-led projects, which I think is wonderful. And the crisis maybe has something to do with this, which is great. It's like maybe one of the silver linings, you know? So I'm loving this. Thank you very much. It was wonderful.